a key theme of today, ladies and gentlemen, has been really looking towards the future and the importance of actually coming up with practical solutions to problems rather than just commentating upon those problems, which seems to happen all too often today. You get people who come along, commentate on the problem, and don't actually offer up a viable solution or don't act upon their commentary whatsoever. So we want to be a positive force in that regard and address that. And so our closing oration by Greg Connolly will focus very much on the future and what that looks like for monarchists, what that looks like for Australia, and so on. But before we do that, we need to talk about young people. Ostensibly, I am a young person, but I probably feel about 85 at heart. So I've enlisted one of my really great friends, Barclay McGain, who is the General Manager of CPAC Australia. Some of you might have heard of CPAC, big organisation. Barclay is the General Manager of it, doing a fantastic job. Would you like to come up, Barclay? And we're going to have a conversation about young people and the future of the Constitution and Australia.
Unreal.
So just a reminder as well, questions are being taken. Just also one quick housekeeping matter. The Tony Abbott wine, does anyone remember who bought the Tony Abbott wine? Just raise your hand. Yeah, Matthew Sate. I knew MS stood for something. Fantastic, thank you, Matthew. Okay, so Barclay, you've heard the conference so far.
Yep.
Frame your thoughts from a perspective of as a young person.
Definitely. Well, thank you so much, Alexander, and thank you all for attending. This has been incredible as a Brisbaneite, fellow Brisbaneite. It's been well worth the trip coming down. I think that's a really key point, because when we're hosting these, not just now but in future years to come, it's really important that we do look to really diversify the crowd in the sense that we just need more young people in this room. I think every year we can talk about getting 3 or 4 young people. It's on me as well to try and bring 3 or 4 of my peers that I went to university with, friends that I meet, because we really do need to redefine how a lot of people view the monarchy. But I think you've done a tremendous work in doing that, Volts. The monarchy isn't something that's just for people who long for tradition. As we've heard today from Nicole Flint and Nick Cater, it's a very modern and relevant idea and concept. And if people understood the prosperity that it's brought us, they would actually be more likely to cling to it, I think. But I suppose in terms of making it more relevant today, obviously, it goes without saying that we've gone through times where we genuinely thought that we were at real fear of another referendum. I think, when Albanese first got elected in 2022 and he appointed the Assistant Minister for the Republic, it felt like they were on our shorelines kind of moment. But right now it seems that the most kind of, intrusions into what we see as our modern monarchy is those kind of republicanism by stealth, those kind of tactics. That's what I see. Things like changing our currency, even changing the names. I mean, so often now, I live in the city of Brisbane, but the amount of times that it's now being referred to as Meanjin, and there's no community consultation on this. We saw a resounding result, in my opinion, in the Voice referendum, saying that people are done with this whole, white atonement or whitewashing, I suppose, of our history. But it seems like they've just proceeded with it in Victoria with this treaty. It's these kind of forms of republicanism by stealth that I think are really pernicious. They're making their way through, and sometimes we don't even get a say on it. So that's why I think the Australian Monarchist League really serves a great purpose, because, as you pointed out before, some politicians don't see this as the issue to fight on. They don't see it as the issue to fight on, that they should be out there criticising Bob Katter, who they might agree with on a number of issues, and why would you attack Bob Katter? He's just an old funny man. Well, the Australian Monarchist League is there to ensure that he's held to account when no one else will, and I think that's the utility of this organisation. It's maybe on other issues, it's hopefully the utility of my organisation, the Conservative Political Action Conference, CPAC. We have our annual conference each year in September. Our goal is to basically be the keeper of the values. The Australian Monarchist League, of course, they diversify how they communicate their message, and they've done that incredibly well with a great, social media reach. But the values stay the same, right? That they're unalterable. That's the same with CPAC. While the Liberal Party, the Labor Party, and other minor parties, they're subject to the whims of the electorate, right? Our values are timeless. They stay the same, and it's just about how we change our approach. And that's why I'm so glad to be here today and really just it's a resounding message that we need to get, that we need more young people in this room, more young people helping out, because one day I'm certain in my lifetime there will be a time that comes where we do have a genuine referendum. And it'll be on the back of all this republicanism by stealth that'll just become a technicality by that point. And that's what I really do fear about. So, yeah.
Do you think that young people generally are attuned to this republicanism by stealth? Do you think that they know that it's going on? If they know that it's going on, do they have views on it? I mean, what's the psychology here of young people?
Definitely. I think there is a growing consciousness of a lot of young people that are waking up to the quote-unquote wokeness, but they don't necessarily view the wokeness and cling to constitutional monarchy, and that's the next step that we've got to abridge. And it just comes down to things like civic education. The amount of young people that I talk to, and I ask them just elementary questions, really just to gauge a conversation, such as, are you interested in politics? The amount of them that say, not really interested in politics, but I love following American politics because their favorite podcaster, or they listen to Tucker Carlson or the Nelk Boys, names that might not even be heard by people in this room, but this is what the young people are listening to, because you think if you're a cafe in Sydney, who are your competitors? The other people selling coffee in Sydney, right? If you're a podcaster in Australia, you're competing with podcasters in the US with massive sums of money. It's an international market. And so many of these young, impressionable people our age are going towards the shiny, well-funded American option, and that's all they're saturating themselves with. So they'll have more of an idea of what's happening in the Republican primaries in North Carolina, for instance, instead of knowing what's happening in the Warringah pre-selection, for the 2028 election, and that's consequential. And I think that if people really do have more of a local focus, they can get more involved in the system, and ultimately we need a party of government to be on the side of constitutional monarchy. And I'm glad it got brought out today, and I think we should be unrepentant at pointing it out, even though we do have a number of Liberal politicians here today. But if we do have leaders of both parties of government that are out-and-out Republicans, that is a genuine threat. And we saw that, in my opinion, the only way that we were able to defeat the voice referendum was because of the courage of Peter Dutton. Now, Peter Dutton, of course, I think a lot of us would have lamentations for how the last federal campaign was run. But if there's one thing I can tip my cap to Peter on, is he said this voice thing needs to go. We can't have the voice to Parliament. And I do worry that if we were to have a Republican or another referendum on the Republic, at least with the current two leaders, who's going to stand up? I mean, I'm sure we'd have Pauline Hanson stand up, but are they a party of government yet? I know they've been doing very, very well in the polls recently, but you ultimately need seats in the lower house. So it remains to be seen, but we do need those kind of insurances, those backups, those vanguards, that someone could really be out there leading the debate if it was to arise.
We should say as well, shout out to our National Party colleagues here who led the way on the voice to say no, which probably did inspire Peter. It's a great point that Barclay touches on. I hope you can see why I've asked him to come down. He's a very impressive young man, younger than me in any case. It's a great point that Barclay touches on, that really I think, and what I've argued in the media, is that the only road for a successful republic now is bipartisanship.
Yep.
And the danger is that if you have the Liberal Party ostensibly say, well, in 1999 we said, okay, fine, we'll give the say to the people, have the referendum. Really, I'm sorry, we actually ran that exercise.
Yep.
Really what you should be saying is, no, we're going to vigorously debate this in the Parliament because we as Liberals are actually supposed to be monarchists. It's the central tenet of our ideology. What, we're going to betray that? So I feel quite strongly about that as well.
Definitely.
Okay, so more broadly, where are young people politically at the moment? Because it seems to be a very fractured space. You're talking about the influence of America, which is not necessarily a boon for monarchists. What do you see as being the challenges for young people at the time? How are they navigating this politically?
Well, I think that there's a couple big issues that I suppose appeal to young people, and this is maybe taking a departure from the monarchy topic for a moment.
That's
but
fine, yeah.
The big thing for young people I see is getting into the property market, because it's hard to feel stoic and patriotic about your country and its institutions and traditions if you just feel like a passerby going through this country and you don't have any stake in it, right? I think there was a Fred Paul, who's a friend of both of ours. He often says, if you don't have a stake in this country, why would you ever go and sign up to defend it and conscript? I think so often we're also told in our school situation, because we can't look over the fact that this is a failure of the education system, which has become essentially indoctrination, right? And I say that as a university graduate, I think we both went to the University of Queensland, is that fundamentally we need people being able to have a stake in the country by, owning a home. I think that's one of the big issues, and one thing affecting that is immigration. But just on that point about university, it's seemingly the case that we're all told at university that we can truly ascend to the height of all heights. We can do anything, right? I'm someone, when I was at university, I coached chess, and we were always told to give out participation awards, for everyone, and there was no winners and losers. And what this mindset drills into you is an idea of, the world is my oyster, I can go anywhere, right? So you have so many young people, and I think this is why depression rates and suicide and anxiety rates are so high, is because people don't know where their place is in the world. And so they get to 18, 19, and instead of thinking about learning about their country, learning about their institutions, they just hop to various different countries, and they always think, where is right for me? I would encourage everyone to ascend to the highest of heights and truly try and reach their potential. But there needs to be a certain sense of the grass isn't always greener on the other side, it's greener where you water it. Yeah. And that's something that not enough people are involving themselves in their local communities and, watering the grass where it needs to be watered. And you're seeing that with the patronage of a number of key institutions and organisations. So CWA, all-time low membership, Rotary, political parties. There's not enough civic participation. It goes back to the education, in my view. And we need more of that if we are to ultimately save Australia.
Yeah. It's a really interesting point, because you're taught that you can do anything at university, whilst at the same time society is broadly encouraged that elitism is an evil, which is a really funny thing when you think about it. Okay, great. We've got an audience question here now from Damien DePile, who's slightly older than us again. Damien says, many young people have become disillusioned with conservatism as a solution to contemporary problems, asking, what have conservatives actually conserved? Damien asks for your thoughts on this and wonders if there's a solution.
Yep. Well, I think there's kind of like two parts to that. I'll start with the latter. I think, what have conservatives actually conserved? I think it's been a glaring failure on the centre-right of politics to actually engage in the battle of ideas. And for instance, we point to certain wins of elections on a state level or a federal level, and sure, the notional centre-right party of government might win, the Liberal Party, but you ultimately think, okay, you might have won the battle, but have you won the war, right? So if you're winning a battle in an election, let's say you hold on to a teal seat in inner city Sydney, but you are for net zero, you're for mass migration, you're for republicanism, ultimately, are you winning the war? And I think that we're so far on the back foot on a number of issues now that we're ultimately losing the war. And it's just like we're becoming like at 10 years behind of what Labor was. And I think you're seeing that, in a number of, look at gender quotas. It was the case that, gender quotas was antithetical to the Liberal Party. Like, if there was anything that qualified you to be in the Liberal Party, it was believing in the idea of merit. Like, we thought we could all agree on the idea of merit. But now, and even it goes right to the top with Susan Lee, right? You've got people saying that we need gender quotas. So it's a very good question by Damien. Like, what have the conservative side of politics conserved? It's a very good question. And you'd like to think that the next generation coming through could be more vocal on that. And I think they will be, because I think they're the ones that are actually going to feel it. They're the ones that are actually going to disproportionately feel the impacts of mass immigration. If you're a property owner, actually, mass immigration probably does help you, right? Because your asset value increases. But someone like myself trying to get into the property market, suddenly I'm really questioning and dreading the idea of the fact that there's going to be 400,000 net new arrivals here next year. Park the fact that a lot of them don't even share my values, right? That's another issue. And park the fact that a lot of them actually don't have the skills needed to build the homes, which is often the primary argument used for why we need immigration, because they can build new homes. So that's kind of just like a broad-ranging answer to that, I suppose. And it's tough times, but there's a lot of organisations and good, I guess, nucleuses. CPAC's only a new organisation. We started in 2019, and in my opinion, 2020 and 2021 didn't count because we went crazy with COVID in this country, particularly in this state under a Liberal government, might I add. So we're essentially only in our 4th year since our inception, and we're going from strength to strength. I think we had our biggest conference ever in September this year. We had a range of speakers, and I think sometimes this is the other important thing of the value of an organisation like CPAC and the AML. Sometimes you'll have a politician that comes and you think, gee, I wish they could stand up more on this issue, or, Ted O'Brien, for instance, spoke at CPAC Australia and he's not a monarchist. But it's kind of the soft power, because often these politicians never speak in front of a crowd that is conservative, that is unashamedly centre-right. Of course, we're always called the quiet Australians, right? But if they are presented with a lively crowd like this, or even our CPAC crowds, I think we nearly had like 1,200 this year in September, they actually say, there's a whole constituency of people who are here to back me if I stay true to those conservative values and those conservative roots that I just didn't know existed. Because for so many of these politicians, the only thing they're exposed to is organised groups, such as lobbies for, foreign lobbies, multicultural groups, or they're, it could even be the LGBT lobby that they're finding, because they're so well organised on the left, right? And when we have a lobby group like CPAC, like the AML, and they see such a chorus of people saying, we want you to lean in to conservative values, not run away and try and wear this thin veil, they actually say, this is more of an effort for me to dip my toe in. So what am I getting at here? When we're in the crowd and we see someone who I'm like, there's David Crisafulli and he's good, but he didn't stand up on XYZ. It's like, well, that's why we're platforming him, so that he can be in front of a crowd that wants him to lean further in, and maybe we can exert some influence, right? That's what the PAC stands for. PACs are so big in the United States, political action committees, and that's what we need more of here, to keep the politicians honest. Because right now, if you're a voter in your local area, let's say you're in the electorate of Sydney, Tanya Plibersek, right? You're one of 100,000 voters. If you send her a passionate email or you sign a petition, she's going to say, I can just write off one out of 100,000. It's pretty easy to, right? But the moment you're behind a PAC, or let's say you're involved in pre-selections, they have to start listening. So these are ways that we can really supercharge our involvement in politics. And I think that's the utility, that's how we get young people on side. And that's my hope, ultimately.
Shifting gear a little bit there after that excellent response.
Yeah.
You mentioned America, and of course CPAC finds its origins in America. There's another American group that some of you might have heard of called Turning Point USA, which has an Australian chapter as well. It's headed up by Joel Jamal. And Turning Point USA became quite well known in recent months due to the assassination of Charlie Kirk. Now, Barclay, I wanted to get your view on this personally, but also what you think it represents for maybe not even young conservatives, but just for young people in general.
Definitely, and I think we can't underscore just how much of a turning point, literally, this assassination of Charlie was. I was fortunate enough to, well, not fortunate enough, but I just had this idea, I think it was the day after Charlie passed, that we were going to hold a vigil at my alma mater, the University of Queensland. And within 48 hours, I planned it on the Friday, we held it on the Sunday, we had 800 people, and this is at a university campus, right? 800 people attend and pay their respects to someone like Charlie Kirk. And I think the reason why it affected people so much, of course, he was a Christian, so a lot of Christians felt that, they were mourning his death because they held the same Christian faith. Not because he just reached out to young people, but also just because of how graphic it played out, We often have heard about political assassinations, and you'll see some grainy footage of it, or you'll hear about it the next day that Martin Luther King was assassinated overnight and there's no footage. But we saw this in graphic, ultra HD, and from 15 different angles. Just awful and gory. And think about that from a young person's perspective, 15, 16 years old, having to go to school later that day. You are truly traumatized by that. And I think he's ultimately evangelized a whole generation overnight. But the sickest part of all this came in the reaction to what happened to Charlie Kirk's death. Because like no other political assassination in history, have we ever seen some people gleefully celebrate the assassination of a man. And I think so many people who loosely just follow politics kept abreast of it, said, oh, that guy Charlie, yeah, he's got some interesting views, bit controversial. That was probably the median person. And they're saying, whoa, you're glad that he got shot in the neck in front of his daughter, or his 2 daughters and his wife at age 31? You are sick.
Yeah.
Like, and this is not just like 1 or 2 people. This was like federal politicians. I think we had one of the Teal politicians saying that he essentially had it coming and that he deserved it. These are people who we are electing in this city. It's just disgusting. And I think so many people saw that response and said, wow, like, I'm really waking up to this. And the reason why they're waking up to this is, you know, someone like myself who held the exact same views as Charlie Kirk. Well, if heaven forbid I was to be assassinated, or maybe not assassinated, but run over by a bus, would people be celebrating that? I mean, I held the same views as him, right? And it's a real wake-up call. Yeah. It's like, wow, these people are willing to celebrate that. And it comes from this idea that words can be seen as violence. Because the moment you view words as violence, then violence becomes a legitimized response to those words. Yeah. Because it's like tit for tat, right? Yeah. It's like, oh, you said something nasty, then I can hit you because, oh, well, that was a violent word. No. Words cannot be violence. The two are separate, right? That's what believing in free speech means. And so that's why I just, you know, I know that's a bit of a departure from the topic, but I do think it's relevant because we do need to get the young people on board, and we do need more monarchists just shaping the political landscape so that, you know, for instance, there's a great movement in the US called the Tea Party movement, the taxed enough already. That was the movement, right? And what it essentially existed for was that, hey, the conservative movement in the US is going to go more onto social conservative values, right? But we want to be a force in the US that ensures that when the US conservative right goes to more the social issues, that they're still in favor of limited government and lower taxes, right? We want to make sure that when there's an inevitable social conservative movement, you know, back to the right here in Australia, because I think we're always, you know, 10 years behind the US in the society and the culture, that we've got enough monarchists there saying, hey, to be a conservative or to be on the centre right of politics means that you're a monarchist too. Now, of course, in my opinion, you can be on the centre left and even the left and believe in the monarchy as well. But you also did mention the pitfalls. I mean, it's literally worded in the Labor Party's constitution that they are explicitly for a republic. And we do, of course, need, if it was to be a referendum, we need one of those major parties on side. And it does seem so clear that that would be the Liberal Party in its current form, you know, if we were to be able to wrangle it back. So that's kind of just, I think, the legacy that Charlie has left, but it's also the battle cry to future Charlies going forward to realise that they need to be involved, and particularly if they are monarchists.
Fantastic appraisal of the situation. Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks.
Just on the words of violence, 100% agreed. Like, I saw Barack Obama's statement in the aftermath of this that he put out, and just it began with the phrase, this is etched in my mind, it began with the phrase, while we don't know what motivated this attack, and it's like, no, we do. It's that it was a political act of, it was a political execution.
Yeah.
And words of violence, you know. And it's just so disingenuous to have policymakers even try and make a partisan argument out of what occurred. So, 100% support that. Just lingering on Charlie quickly, and then I've got sort of one final question for you. You talk about young leaders being inspired by him.
Yep.
And I want to get your view on this. Obviously, we know people who are going through the youth movements of political parties and so on. We know people on the right. We actually also know people on the left.
Yes.
And we know that Charlie and other things, and predictable things probably, ladies and gentlemen, are inspiring young people on the right. I wonder if you could comment on them, but also the young people on the left who are getting involved in politics. You just had mock parliament and so on in Queensland. Like, what is the sort of characteristic of them as well?
Well, yeah, it's very timely. In fact, you know, in my home state of Queensland last night, and that's why I actually flew in bright and early this morning to Sydney, we actually had mock parliament, essentially where the young LNP, the Liberal and the National Party in Queensland, you know, go ahead and debate young Labor. And I will just say, you know, maybe on a humorous point, you can definitely tell the difference between the young Laborites and the young LNPites, just in the terms of the way they choose to dress, in the physiognomy of some of these people. But I will say that one of the things that was just so alarming to me is, to their credit, in my view, the young LNP refused to do a welcome to country.
Oh, that's cool.
Which I thought was admirable. So we haven't lost all sanity yet. But even more alarming was the fact that Young Labor's response was to stage a walkout. So 8 of their youth parliamentarians decided to walk out, storm out of the chamber, and they thought that it was just disrespectful and disgusting. That's what they said. And this is essentially how they're viewing the world, right? And I was someone who was very fortunate enough to be involved in Queensland Youth Parliament, and it was a tremendous initiative. And I was the sole voice, the sole dissenter, saying that we don't need the creation of Indigenous-only electorates in the state parliament. That was a proposal that was proposed by the Youth Parliament, and I was the sole person saying that, hey, maybe we shouldn't be dividing us on the lines of race. It should just be, if you're Indigenous, you can feel free to run like everyone else, right? And that's a message that Jacinta Price, and I'm so glad she's speaking tonight, that's a message that she preaches. Same with Martin Luther King Jr., right? Judge me on the content of my character, not the colour of my skin. So it's pretty grim when you see the state of Young Labor these days. There are good eggs, of course, and some bad eggs in the Young LNP. But it's really important that we do encourage those ones that are out there leading the good fight, yourself included, Alexander. We've also got Patrick Kenny here today. He's very involved in the WA Young Monarchists. He's been very involved in the running of this as well.
Yeah, hugely.
And people like in New South Wales who've got Freya Leach. I mean, young Freya Leach, she had a show on Sky News. I know she's still a feature on Sky News on a number of their shows. But these are people who are, in my opinion, having the maturity, instead of seeing the pitfalls and the failures of the Liberal Party, instead of throwing their hands up and saying, okay, I'm going to start the 15th minor right-wing party, right, that'll get 0.5% at the ballot box, they're saying, you know what? I've just suffered a loss in an internal battle in the Liberal Party. I'm going to bring 20 of my friends in next time to ensure that we win it. Something like that is a great response, because the Aussie way, as far as I'm concerned, is that when going gets tough, the tough get going, right? And if we had to just look at the Liberal Party and say, they didn't stand up enough on net zero, and Susan Lee is not a good enough leader, I'm leaving and I'm going to join Trumpet of Patriots, right? That's in my opinion, and I'm saying this unapologetically, people can of course feel free to disagree, I hope you disagree sometimes, right? That's an immature response. That's a give it up, I'm trying something else, I'm going to cede the entire playing field. Remember, we need a party of government if we are to win a prospective referendum one day, right? So that's kind of just, we need to reorient where the playing field is, right? Now, of course, you can scream from the sidelines and people can say that they've got a social media following, but ultimately, we need to be involving ourselves in the pre-selection process because we cannot afford more Malcolm Turnbull-style people to infect these institutions. Remember, Malcolm Turnbull obviously led the Republican campaign in '99 and somehow weaseled his way into being the leader and the Prime Minister. They're literally among us, and this is from this city. So these are the things that we need to be ever vigilant of. And let me tell you, they're becoming more and more prevalent if we keep splintering the collective centre-right in Australia into a gazillion different minor parties. That is a fool's errand, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, absolutely. And for all sorts of reasons, I would imagine the preference discipline is just not there.
Yes.
Whereas the Greens always go to Labor. It really is the case that Teals always go to Labor.
Yep.
I think the ultimate trifecta is if you're up against a Green, a Teal, and a Labor candidate, you just cannot win.
Yeah.
You just can't. That's actually what happened to Peter Dutton in the election.
Yep.
It strikes me that the only reason you'd give up on the Liberal Party is not because they didn't win the election, not because they were badly led or so, but simply because you didn't believe that their ideas were still relevant. That would seemingly be the only reason you'd give up on the We Believe statement.
Yep.
And if you hold the position like I do that the We Believe statement is a timeless one, then it's a very difficult thing to give up on. Now, I hope everyone's having a really good time. I am as well. So I know I said I had really only one more question for Barclay after this, but I've got two more. So, so just the penultimate one now. Look, there's there's always a risk when, in the wake of Charlie Kirk, in the reactionary sort of experience that people have when, the going gets tough, that the pendulum swings too far back the other way. And there's some people, I've read this, it's called horseshoe theory, where really it all just meets up the top in authoritarianism and libertarianism and sort of thing is right down the bottom. I just wonder, do you think that at the present moment we are in danger of maybe the pendulum swinging a little bit too far back to what we would collectively understand as the right? And if that was the case, maybe it's not, I don't know, then, what might we do about that?
Definitely. I think that when you have such a tragedy like this, you see a lot of people, and there's obviously, of course, a threat that people respond with violence, right? But in my opinion, two wrongs don't make a right. And that's why I just thought, and I don't know how I got it, but immediately after what happened to Charlie, I said, we need to have a vigil, and it needs to be entirely peaceful. And that's what we're able to do in Queensland. That's what Joel Jamal, who's, heading up Turning Point, Australia. In fact, he's actually at the America Fest Turning Point USA conference in Phoenix, Arizona right now. And that was what I think has to be, lauded, is the fact that they responded to Charlie Kirk's assassination with, I guess, peaceful vigils, as opposed to turning the barrel back on them, because that is ultimately how our society falls. And I think that the US, as we know, they don't have a system of government that is tried and tested like our Australian democracy. In my opinion, they're actually quite fickle, and you'll find that they're quite a divided country as a result of their republic, in my opinion. Their presidential system lends to a more divided system. That is ultimately a very scary prospect. So I think it's very, very good that we're able to move on from these atrocities in a peaceful manner. But it's also what Charlie would have wanted. And this is something that I think should just become part and parcel for any kind of event, is that if you disagree with some of the content that was happened and espoused on stage, then if you're a questioner, you come to the front. Because we need to see more of this exchange and this battle of ideas, because the moment we fall into echo chambers, this is how the radicalization happens. The moment you get into an echo chamber, let's say you go down some kind of rabbit hole of your favorite influencer, that is really how you end up with such a warped view of the world. And, it's one thing that the young people call, the term is black-pilled, essentially that there are three pills that you can take in society. The blue pill, that everything is dandelions and roses. The red pill, which is what we should all aspire to, that there are some good and some bad in the world. But then there's this very, very bad one called black-pilled, and that is essentially nihilism. It's essentially saying, this is all too hard, Charlie's dead, shrug my shoulders, hate everyone, won't look after myself, won't eat well, won't try and get a girlfriend or a boyfriend if you're a girl, right? And you essentially it's just a road to nihilism. You think, oh, what's the point of having kids? What's the point of saving for a home? It's too hard, right? You need to have some semblance of hope, right? Maybe when I'm 85, I can afford to throw my hands up and lose hope, right? But I'm 25, and a number of my friends are 25. We, above all people, cannot afford to lose hope, right? And even in the darkest of circumstances, when your favorite political influencer like Charlie Kirk has been assassinated, you just got to keep on pushing on. You need that inner drive, that inner cause. And for a lot of people, it is a faith. And I would encourage a lot of people, if they haven't found a faith yet, to really look at investigating that, because it can really revitalize your life in a number of ways. But if not a faith, really just having some kind of community. I think the utility of a lot of these organisations like the Lions, like the CWA, the Rotary, is they give you some kind of community, something to keep you honest, and something that you can ultimately live for and contribute to beyond just yourself. Because the moment you're just looking after yourself, that's how we end up with, just some form of nihilism, and you lose any kind of fabric that your community's been built on. So that's a bit of a long-winded response, but yeah.
This has been such a pleasure. I've really enjoyed it. My last question to Barclay is, Barclay, what can people, maybe older people or just people in general, like some of the people sitting in this room, what can they do to actually support young people like yourself or others?
Definitely. Well, I was so proud that in my time at university, we started the UQ Monarchist League, and that's now grown to be the largest student monarchist organisation in Australia. We run a number of events. So a friend of mine who tragically lost his own life due to suicide in 2020, we're now in the 5th edition of hosting our annual gala ball in his honour, the Wilson Gavin Gala Ball. And each year we try and raise money for young men's mental health. You know, it's a startling statistic that the most likely way that myself and Alexander are supposed to die right in front of you right now is by suicide. That's the number one way we're supposed to die. Like, you think car crashes, you know, heart attack, you know, drug overdose, right? No, suicide in some form. That's essentially the prognosis, and that's what the stats are showing in society. But, you know, we've got the UQ Monicus League. It's very helpful when we have people engaging with us. But also my organisation that I'm working for now, CPAC. You know, we are trying to give back to the youth. In fact, we're sending 20 young students over to CPAC USA in Dallas, Texas in late March of next year. And that's through the generosity of a number of donors. People who put their money where their mouth is. People who probably used to give to the Liberal Party and now have realised that there's a more effective way to channel political change on the centre-right of politics. And this is a vehicle. That's what we're essentially doing. We're providing a vehicle with which people who are passionate about the issues, because ultimately that's what it's about. It's about the issues, you know, repealing bad policy and passing good policy. And that's the various ways that people can get involved. So I'd encourage everyone here, if there's anything you can do, is really get in touch with young people, seeing what they're doing, or if you don't necessarily have a direct line, get involved with these other organisations. And I'd love to see, 10 of my friends be able to be sponsored here. I'm very fortunate that, I'm working full time and I'm able to pay for my flights to come down here. But if you're a 19-year-old, the prospect of paying $500 for return flights and maybe overnight accommodation, it nearly becomes $1,000 just to attend this conference. And I think we should be having this as a truly national conference, not just Sydney-based people. But I'd love to be able to make it, 50, 60 young people coming each year. So it's a capital thing. It's about getting enough people involved, and that's ultimately how we're going to triumph, I think. Yeah.
And I should just say very quickly, we were very grateful to get some support for students to participate in the conference as well. So that was great. Ladies and gentlemen, Barclay McGain. Thank you.
I'm sorry, I'm going to totally interrupt the agenda here, Alexander, because I think you two have been absolutely inspirational, and what a terrific thing that these fabulous young men, and next time there'll be young women won't
too,
there, have come here today to actually inspire us to get going and make sure there are more young people involved in all these organisations. And I've just decided I'm going to organise a Battle of the Ideas forum.
Awesome.
You two are going to be on it, and we'll do that with a number of other young people to try and make sure that the views that you can express and inspire others to express are multiplied across this country, because I think they've just been fantastic. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
That's very kind. If we have a battle of ideas, we'll start with the obvious question. Beethoven or Mozart? No, that's fine. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. That's
Awesome.
great.
Thanks, guys.
I really appreciate it.